With this Shabbat being Shabbat HaGadol, the Shabbos directly before Pesach, and as reading the Parsha of Tzav, we're going to use the time to prepare ourselves for the Seder. The first Seder will be a week from Wednesday night. And we'll try to build some understanding that we can share with our children, because after all, the Seder night's purpose is that we should convey forward to our children and our children's children, whatever the circumstance is, our belief, our conviction, the essence of our Judaism. So it's a big task. It works differently for different people, as the Haggadah itself lays out for us. But let's at least look at things together. I want to begin with an insight into Parsha of this week, which is Parsha Tzav. Talks mostly about the korbanot, about the offerings that take place, sort of a repeat in many ways of what we had in last week's Torah reading. But I want to just, in a bit of a fanciful way, read the second sentence and make some allusions to it. It's on, was here a minute ago. It's on page 568 in the Stone Chumash. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, command Aaron and his sons, saying, this is the law of the elevation offering. It is the elevation offering that stays on the flame on the altar all night until the morning, and the fire of the altar should remain aflame on it. So the title of the Parsha, Tzav, is an unusually strong language. Command. Tzav et Aaron. Rashi commenting on the unusualness, because after all, the portion begins by Daber Hashem, and Hashem spoke to Moshe, which is the usual sense, Tzav et Aaron, command Aaron. So Rashi says this is a language of zaruz, to be zealous, to be filled with energy, to undertake what you're doing with a tremendous sense of conviction. And then Rashi says, miyad u'ledorot. And it's not just a one-time energetic burst that the Torah is referring to here, but rather in every generation, Aaron and his descendants after him should see this as Zot Torah Ta'olah. This is the elevation offering. It has a special status, it has a special purpose, and they should be filled with excitement and energy in undertaking to fulfill it. The second aspect, as Aaron Uvanov, speak to Aaron and his sons, which indicates this generational idea. The third idea, Zot Torah Ta'olah, this is the laws of the elevation offering. And interestingly, the Or HaChaim in his commentary broadens this out, and he makes a reference to a sentence in the Song of Songs, which talks about the Jewish people as Ola min hamidbar, the same word Ola, which is an elevation offering that's consumed completely on the temple altar. It also refers to the Jewish people rising out of the wilderness and coming to the land of Israel. And finally, the fourth idea, it says Kol halayla, ad haboker. It should happen all night long until the morning. And I just wanted to connect this to our approach to Pesach and to the Sedorim, because after all, we know this idea of being filled with energy and conviction is certainly a necessity if we're going to really have an impact on our children and generations to come. If we want to pull from within ourselves a conviction of the truth of Judaism, and as Beryl Wine often used to say when people asked him, why are you Jewish? Why are you observant? What he used to say is, I believe this is true because my father would not have lied to me. And in fact, that's a statement of the rabbis, that we have this generational transition of carrying forward the heritage of the Jewish people from one heart to the other. And just like Moshe here is commanding Aaron and his children after him. So that's our job. Our job is to sit down at the Pesach Seder and to see to it that we muster the conviction, the energy, the zealousness to do our job from generation to generation. And what are we doing? This is the Torah of the Olah, of the rising up, of the Jewish people becoming distinguished and fulfilling its job amongst the nations of the world. So that fits into the sentence too. And of course, the final reference, Kol Halayla Ad Boker, all night long until the morning. We have in the Haggadah very famously that when they sat in Bnei Brak and they had their Seder, the rabbis talked and discussed and debated and brought forward all of the conviction possible until such time as the students had to knock on the door and say, Rabbeinu, it's time to say Shema, it's morning already. So you see in a fanciful way how this first sentence in the Parshat Tzav has parallels to what we're undertaking to do at the Seder next Wednesday night. And please God, we should be successful doing it. In preparing for the Seder, I wanted to start with the why. And I wish we had the opportunity to have an open forum here. I know I've asked people to chime in before, it hasn't happened. But let's simply ask a question. Why is it that God redeemed us from Egypt? Okay? We're sitting down. We want our children, we want to re-experience for ourselves the entire going out of Egypt with all of its excitement, with all of its amazement, with all of its wonder. And we want to have everyone at our Seder table share in that. Ki'ilu hu atzmo, as if each and every one of us experienced the going out of Egypt. So a simple question, and it's a question that has more than one answer to it. But let's just consider, why did God redeem us from Egypt? Anybody want to unmute or offer an answer? Because he made a promise to Abraham. Okay, that's a great thing, a great idea. We're going to get back to it, and we'll see where that plays out. But I want to start with the one sentence that is quoted 4 times in the Haggadah. Okay, there's only one such sentence. The person who emphasizes this a lot is Rav Osher Weiss in Israel. He always starts off by asking a question: what is the one sentence that is quoted 4 times in the Haggadah? And if we turn to page 362 in the Art Scroll Chumash, it's Shmos chapter 13, sentence 8, and it reads as follows: V'higadato levincha bayom ahu lemor, and you shall tell, Haggadah, you shall tell your children, your child, it's in the singular, you shall tell your child on this day, saying, Ba'avor zeh, because of this, Asa Hashem li b'tzeisi mimitzrayim, because of this, God took me out of Egypt. So here's the smoking gun. Because of this. What's the this? Sort of missing from the sentence. It's the very question that Rashi raises right away. Okay? And Rashi takes a very straightforward approach, and we're going to be consistent here in looking at the reason why God took us out of Egypt through the lens that Rashi fixes on the narrative in the Torah. Okay, so here's our core mitzvah. It's one of the 2 biblical mitzvot, commandments, that we fulfill at the Seder. Number 1 being eating matzah, and number 2 being telling the story of going out of Egypt. There, in fact, are several dozen mitzvos out of the 613 commandments that apply specifically to next Wednesday night. And you can look them up in the in the counting of the mitzvot. Unfortunately, because we don't have a Beit HaMikdash, we don't have a temple, because we don't offer the Paschal Lamb, and even our eating of the bitter herbs, which is biblically mentioned, the rabbis learn out it's only a biblical fulfillment if it's eaten together with the Paschal lamb. So our eating of the bitter herbs is a rabbinic fulfillment. But our telling of the story and our eating of the matzah are the two mitzvot min haTorah, the two biblical commandments we're able to fulfill. So let's go back to the sentence again. V'higadata levincha, tell your child, bayam alhu, on this very night, Lamor, saying, because of this, God took us out of Egypt. What's the missing clause? So Rashi comments something which is impressively important, and it fits in with what we're going to say later on in the Seder itself. What is the this? The this is the matzah and the moror and the paschal lamb. Zeh, bavur zeh, we point with our finger. So Rashi says, God took us out of Egypt because we would in the future fulfill the requirements of the Torah. We got out of Egypt on the come, so to speak. And that's what the Torah is telling us here. So it's a very big statement. It's something, so we're sitting down to tell the story to our children. And if our children ask us, and it could be a cute circular problem in terms of reasoning. Why are we doing this? Because this is the reason God took us out of Egypt. Why did God take us out of Egypt? Because we're doing this. But that's the case. The fact that 3,338 years after leaving Egypt, we, please God, are going to sit down at a Seder table, and we're going to have on our table matzah and moror and a remembrance of the Paschal offering, and we're going to retell the story. It's because we're doing that today. And of course, we've done it all these 3,338 years. That's the reason we went out. It was on the come. That's the way Rashi explains it. So this ties so much back to what we said, the word tzav, when in the weekly Torah reading, when Moshe tells Aaron, be strong, be zealous, be energetic. In other words, the way we conduct ourselves next Wednesday night at the Seder is justifying the amazing events that took place in Egypt, the 10 plagues, the splitting of the sea, everything that we talk about. That's the reason for it. Now, there's a lot of questions on this, and we're going to look a little bit more deeply into it. But understand, we say something, and I'll just make the reference, it's in the prayers on Shabbos also, Shebishifleinu Zachar Lanu Ki Olam Chasto. In our bereft state, God remembered us. That's referring to us when we were in Egypt. We had so forsaken the dignity. Now, again, we did it under oppression. 400 years, 210 years, 110 years, 80 years. There's all these different numbers. But in any event, the numbers are huge. The numbers are magnified. When you think about the smallest number of 80 years of real oppression from the time they first threw the little boys into the Nile River, after having enslaved the Jews for 30 years before that, you're talking about immense periods of time when Moshe wonders whether the Jewish people can hear him when he comes to redeem them. He's referring to the fact of how broken we, the Jewish people, were. And yet God acted. God redeemed us. Why? Because God knew, and God will ensure the fact that throughout the remaining years of history, we will honor these events. We will retell them with energy and excitement and conviction to our children and our grandchildren. And carrying this forward will be precious to us. And that's Rashi's fill in the blank of the sentence, Ba'avur Zeb, because of this, God took us out of Egypt. Now let's peel back the onion, so to speak, chronologically. Because if we go back to Genesis chapter 18, sentence 19, which is on page 82 in the Stone Chumash. We see something there, which is directly supportive of what Rashi just said. What does the sentence say in sentence 19? Kiyodativ, because I know about Abraham, Laman asher yitzave et bonov, that he will command his children, v'yas beso, in his household acharov, that will come after him. How? V'shamru derech Hashem, they will guard over the way of God. Lasos tzedakah umishpat, they will do acts of righteousness and justice. Laman chevi Hashem el Avram et asher diber olav, and therefore I will bring upon Avraham, and this ties in with what you said before, all that I promised him. What did I promise him? That his children would be distinguished in the world, that we would be a source of blessing for the world, that we will elevate mankind, we will be a light unto the nations. All of these prophecies is what God promised. What is it? What is the linchpin here? God is expressing himself, Laman Yedativ, which Rashi says, I love him. I love Avraham. And it's in the context of God sharing with Avraham what's going to happen with the city of Sodom. Because God is really saying here, I love Avraham so much that he's going to be my partner throughout the rest of history in shaping human events and human affairs. That's the context of which this comes. And again, what's the essence of it? Is this commitment forward, that we should have children and descendants, so tzedakah umishpat, they act righteously, they act justly, they act fairly. They're willing to place the mandates of God over and above their own expediencies and their own desires and wants. They're willing to live within that system that God is teaching, has taught to Avram, and he exemplifies it. And it's going to carry on throughout the generations. So again, Rashi's circling back to the same idea as to this is what the essence was. And we'll go back a little further to chapter 16, page 66 in the Stone Chumash. And what do we find there? I'm sorry, it's chapter, wrote it wrong here, 15, sentence 8.
Okay.
Famous sentence in the Torah.
Okay.
What?
What page?
What page is on page 66 in the Stone Chumash?
Yeah.
And this already is a chapter which is referenced in Nagot. I'll go back a sentence. God speaks to Avram and says, I am the God who took you out of Ur Kasdim to give you this land as an inheritance. Vayomar, and Abraham asks, Hashem Elohim is the very unusual spelling of God's name, because the Hashem is spelled Aleph Dalet as if it's written Ado, but we pronounce it Hashem. And the Elohim, which refers to God as justice, is written with a Yud He Vav He, which is usually referring to mercy. Bama Eda Ki Eroshena. How do I know? And we'll add Rashi's idea here that they will merit inheriting it. In other words, Avraham, from the get-go, is asking God, how is this going to work? You're making these promises throughout history and throughout time to me that I have children, will be a blessing, my family will grow, stars in the sky, one thing after another. What's going to prevent them from losing this stature and not being true to the mission, which is the norm and the commonplace situation throughout history for nations of the world? What's going to prevent that from happening? And how does God answer him? God answers him, and we cover this in the Haggadah narrative. Your children will be enslaved for 400 years. What kind of an answer is that? Is that what, how do I know my children are going to persevere? How do I know they're going to be people I'm proud of? How do I know they're going to carry forward this forward this great spiritual legacy. And God says, you know how? Because they're going to be enslaved for 400 years. What does it mean? To keep it as simple as possible, Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, emphasizing the very nature of God, of the way Abraham addressed God, of Hashem Elohim, written in different letters. You, God, you know, and I'll read the words to you because they're very sensitive. You know, Hashem, how to impose judgment, whereas the judgment itself is an act of mercy. And that's what he's writing into that name. Your wisdom knows when justice, consequences, discipline, whatever word you want to use here, is necessary to bring forth a brighter future. So Abraham was approaching God by saying, God, you're making all these promises. Will you agree to interact with my descendants throughout history in a way which will keep us carrying forward the very mission that you've given to me, the very mission that I, as one individual, together with my wife, Sarah, have undertaken to bring to the world. It's a lonely mission. It's Abraham, the Hebrew, because he's on one side of the river and the whole world is on the other side of the river. How will it sustain itself? And how will this happen? And God and Avram is almost proposing to God, it'll require your judgment in terms of guiding the Jewish people forward throughout history. And that's what God says, Yodea Teda, you should know, your children will be enslaved for 400 years. There will be bitter experiences. There will be experiences which will break down the will and the dignity of the Jewish people only as necessary to sustain the focus and mission and to really keep the world going, because the world depends on this. So that's the interaction. So if when you play this out forward, we just did it backwards. It makes perfect sense that God, on the 15th day of Nisan, comes to Egypt and rescues the descendants of Abraham so that we can have our matzah and our moror and our Paschal Lamb remembrance on our table, so that we can feel this association with our forefathers, which is the matzah. This is the bread of affliction that they ate, so that we can taste the bitter herbs with the understanding that Abraham gives it here, which is that bitterness has a purpose to it, to remind us, to push us back, to keep us back on track. And then that Paschal Lamb gives us the opportunity to stand out, to take what others might consider idolatry and make it an offering to God, to put in front of God all of our energies and our focus and our convictions and our joys and our happinesses and our sadnesses, and to bring it all into our relationship with God, and that sustains us. And I'll just tell you a fanciful reference. Many people have the custom to wear a kittel, to dress in white. And there's different reasons. Not everyone has this custom. One explanation of a kittel, and it's so contemporary for this Pesach, is that it's a white flag saying that we surrender our judgment to God's judgment, which has a lot to do with the idea that when we take the body of a deceased person and we dress it in white. In other words, it's a point in which my will is subservient to your will, God, just as Abraham was proposing at the very beginning of this decree. And I would also say that this idea of Zroa Netuya, the idea we refer to God having an outstretched hand, Yad Chazaka, a strong hand, it's the way we answered some of the sons. It attaches to the sentence in Mishlei, Rabot Machshavot B'Levish. We have many ideas, we have many thoughts. Batzat Hashem Hitakum. We surrender them to God's judgment forward, and therefore we're ready to muster the strength and muster the energy to carry this all forward. A third point. in this sentence that we're talking about, Balvor Zeh, the basic sentence of the Haggadah, again, it's Exodus chapter 13, sentence 8. It's the one sentence that appears 4 times in the Haggadah, more than any other sentence. There is a commentary, the Avudraham, and I see this in other commentaries as well. Rabbi Genack referred to this in the Jewish Action article, that says there's another time that we declare, and that's when we bring the Bikurim. It's a different section of the Torah. It's in Devarim, chapter 26, sentence 5, but it actually is an important text within the Haggadah. Because when the rabbis say Aramea Vodavi, our ancestors served in Aramean, and they go through and we were enslaved there, that's really not taken from the whole book of Exodus, which explains what happens. It's taken for the ultimate declaration that's made in the future in the land of Israel when the first fruits are brought to the Kohen at the time of the temple. And the way I understand this double use is that the word Higadata is a flexible word. God can tell us when we're in the midst of enslavement that I'm going to take you out so that you can carry forward the legacy of Abraham by conveying it forward with conviction to your children generation after generation, by fulfilling these many, many mitzvot at the time of the Torah. For us, it's going to be 2, eating the matzah and telling the story. So that's a perspective that gives us a reason to be redeemed. And then once we're redeemed, once we're in a position where we have so much to be thankful for, in spite of everything, the limitations that are taking place, in spite of the fact that we're still yearning for an ultimate redemption. But it also is an expression of thanksgiving and appreciation. The same word, v'higadata, means both. In the interest of time, let me just go through something quickly. I was always perplexed by the way we begin the Seder. Okay? How do we begin the Seder? We speak in Aramaic. There's a reason for that, which we'll let go of right now. But right after we make Kiddush, and before we start telling the story, or just as we start to tell the story, we just make sure I have it right. We wash our hands, we dip the green into the salt water, we break the middle matzah, and now we're ready to fulfill this mitzvah from the Torah of telling the story. So we hold up a matzah, Hol Nachma Anya, the Achla Avosana Bi'ara Mitzrayim. In Aramaic, we say, see this piece of matzah? This is all we had to eat at one point in our history. We were in tough shape. And we connect that to call Dichvin Yesev Yechol. Let anybody who's hungry or needy come in and join us. Called Dietrich Yesev Yitzchak. Why? Because the outgrowth of that oppression is a Jewish home that cares for others, that's cognizant of the fact that whereas we may have a full Seder table in front of us laden with delicacies, others have less. And therefore, we're ready to open and share what we have with others, because that's a central lesson of carrying on this legacy of Abraham, of doing tzedakah umishpat, of fulfilling righteousness and justice. Next statement, linked statement, Hashta Hacha, Lashon Haba B'Har Israel. Now we're here. Next year we'll be in the land of Israel. Now, first of all, saying that we're here is a funny thing to say. It's always, when you call somebody up and you say, I'm lost, and they say, where are you? And you say, I'm here. It's not very helpful. So what's the concept of this? What's the idea that we're here? We fully believe with conviction that wherever we are right now, we're headed to a more complete redemption, to a better future. This is that expression of hope, that confidence in the future. God calls the shots. So ultimately, every judgment God is making is in our benefit, just as we just explained. And the third statement, the third group of statements, Hashata Avde, right now we're slaves. Next year we'll be free. I don't feel like a slave. I don't know if you feel like a slave. But what's the conviction we're expressing here? And this is the third aspect of the Seder. We want to grow. We want to change. we want to feel more deeply these ideas that we, as descendants of Abraham and Sarah, our conviction is lasot tzedakah mishpat. We're going to do righteousness. We're going to give charity. We're going to help others, and we're going to see that justice is preserved, and that there's a line of what God expects us to do that we can hold on to. So these three ideas, that the outcome is that we build Jewish homes with hope for a brighter future and with the expectation that we ourselves as individuals are going to adapt. We're going to become more free. Last week I explained to the idea we're going to become less jealous. We're going to become less motivated by our personal honor. We're going to be people who are able to moderate our own personal wants in keeping with the respect and the need of others. And that's what the idea is. Next year will be free. Next year will be more capable of conveying this legacy forward. And I just want to say something that next year is next year. Like I say, there's a frustration that I just want to express that the enemies of the Jewish people are not subject to us convincing them that anti Semitism is wrong. They're not subject to us bombing them into obliteration because it seems no matter how many bombs we drop, wherever we drop them, these organizations, these ideas, they proliferate. It's a game of whack-a-mole, and it's been that way all the way through Jewish history. So therefore, what? So next year, let's be more free. Let's be more upstanding. Let's become more completely exemplary of the legacy of Abraham and Sarah so that we can put our shoulders to the wheel. We can understand that all of God's judgments have a goal, and that goal is to build us up so that we can build the world. And then we could say, L'shana haba b'nei chorin, next year we should be free. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim habenuyah, please God, we should be successful. And next year we should be celebrating Pesach. And it shouldn't just be two mitzvos that we're fulfilling, but it should be dozens of them. And it should happen soon in our lifetime.